So congratulations, class of 2025. My name is Gail Sweezy. I'm the Dean of Admissions, and I welcome all of you to the Distinctive Panels program that we have for you tonight. You will soon have an opportunity to hear from the directors of the Eisenhower Institute, the Center for Public Service, and also the Garthwait Leadership Center. We will have a Q&A at the end of the presentation, and we will use the Q&A function for that. And also you should know that this session is also being recorded. So it is my pleasure now to turn this over to my colleagues to talk with you about three really important and distinguished programs here at Gettysburg College.
Thanks, Gail. Hi, everyone. I'm Rob Boyer. I'm an associate provost at the college and the dean of public policy programs. And so I get to oversee the Eisenhower Institute. Quick history, Ike was actually stationed at Gettysburg around World War I and then retired to the area and was on the board of trustees of the college. And beginning in around 2009, the Eisenhower Institute had been different formats and it formally became part of Gettysburg College. And so this is a part of Gettysburg College, and we run several different programs that are focused around student participation. So I'll talk to you about a few of those tonight, a little bit about that. First of all, we have semester-long programs, and these are the programs that we ran in the past year. These change from year to year depending on current events, what's going on, who's available, and things like that we can do. This last year, we've run Washington Connection, so we ran two sections of that. One of those in the fall that focused around the election, and then one again in the spring, which looks more at just DC and what's operating in Washington, DC. We also have semester-long programs in environmental leadership. In the past, this had been a year-long program, but we decided this year to split it into two semester programs, so a different group of students each semester. That program looks at issues, whether it's water usage systems. They've gone to Florida in the past, but they look at environmental issues, maybe Chesapeake Bay. That works under Howard Ernst, who's a professor and faculty member at the U.S. Naval Academy. Women in Leadership is another one of our programs, and that program is run by Professor Ann Dowds, who's in our public policy program. That program brings in speakers, women, including alumni who are from recent alumni, and then alumni who've graduated from years past, and then people with no real connection to the college, just who are in leadership posts to talk about issues related to gender and leadership. Another semester-long program is Inside Civil Rights. That's a program that I run. It's centered around the Little Rock desegregation in 1957. But what we do, we don't just look at Little Rock, we also look at contemporary civil rights issues, whether they're in education, policing, mass incarceration, and things like that. We also offer year-long programs. Susan Eisenhower runs the Strategy and Leadership and Transformational Times. That what they focus on in that program varies from year to year. In the past, it's looked at Normandy and the issues related to Normandy, but also puts those in a contemporary light. Danny Seabright, who is a friend of the college, runs a program called Contours of the Middle East. This program looks at issues, particularly now with the Gulf states. He has a long experience with the Defense Intelligence Agency and works for in the United Arab Emirates. And so he talks about contemporary pressing issues in the Middle East. Probably of less interest to you right now, but something that might be interest to you in the future is two senior level programs. So all the other programs that I've talked about are open to any students, any Gettysburg College students. The senior level programs are applications that people put in at the end of their junior year. So we just put those out for next year's senior level programs. There are two of those. One is the Eisenhower Institute Undergraduate Fellows Program, which has a rotating topic that they talk about. Next year, I believe they're going to focus on China. It's headed by the Evans Professor of Eisenhower Leadership Studies, Professor Brendan Cushing-Daniels from the Economics Department. And then we also have the Fielding Fellows Program, which looks at executive legislative affairs. Now that one's going through transition. In the past, it's been taught by Professor Shirley Ann Warshaw in the Political Science Department. And in the future, next year, it will be Professor Warshaw sadly is retiring. And so we'll have Professor Scott Bottery from the Political Science Department will be handling those programs. So those are one of the things that a lot of times students are interested in. We run between 90 to, this year we had 170 students go through those because we did a lot of them virtual and we doubled up some on the semester. So there are opportunities to take part in those programs. In addition to those programs though, a couple of other points. One, there is no cost for participation in these programs. This year, with the virtual environment and also with COVID, we have not traveled, but we do have an office in Washington, D.C. that's very close to the Capitol. We also have an office in Gettysburg. But if you're accepted into one of these programs, there is no cost to you outside of anything that you would want to spend money on. So if the program travels, then that's taken care of. We also have frequent public lectures. And so this year we've been running a couple of different programs. One where we've looked at post-election. We looked at one on the January 6th events. And some of these are internal for just the campus community, but others are widespread and can be available on Zoom or in person when we get back to being in person. Something we've started in the last couple of years is students who are in our programs, we try to connect them with our alumni. We have a pretty broad alumni network in Washington, D.C., some people in Harrisburg, some in New York City. And so what we try to do is connect current students with students who are alums so that they can connect, get to know each other, create connections for people, and potentially open up some pathways to internships. That's a quick overview of what we do. If you'd like to learn more, I've put the Eisenhower Institute website in there, and then also you can email us at ei.gettysburg.edu. And if you have questions for me in the Q&A, I'd appreciate hearing those. So I'll turn it over now to our next speaker.
Greetings, everyone. It's so good to see you all here today, and congratulations on your acceptance into Gettysburg College. We're excited to welcome you to the community. My name is Gretchen Carlson Natter, and I have the privilege of working with our Center for Public Service. And here in our department, we work with the community. It's our job to engage the institution in the work of community change and social justice. And so we take that to heart in really thinking about not just volunteering. Volunteering is important, but we want to work beyond meeting people's immediate needs. We serve meals, we provide tutoring, we work in homeless shelters, those kinds of things. But really what we want to do is to address the systemic issues that are causing hunger, that are causing immigration issues, that are causing inequities in our education system, and really engage our students working alongside Adams County, our home, and thinking about the local solutions and how we create the change. So when you participate in a Center for Public Service program, you're going to be doing the work, but you're also going to be doing that work in partnership, so that we're meeting community identified needs. You're going to be doing so in a way so that over time you're educated about what those issues look like on a local level, while putting them into a national and global context as we talk about policy, as we talk about decision making related to kind of persistent issues. And we want you to think critically about what's going on, and so that you can take informed action as you work alongside people in the Adams County community. We have lots of ways that we do that. Sometimes students choose to do that of their own time, right? And so, for example, right now here during the pandemic, unfortunately, we can't be in the schools during the school day or for after school programs for the most part. So our students worked with agency partners to create an online tutoring program that they're calling Guide. And they meet with kids every night of the week, Monday through Thursday, for an hour. And sometimes it's helping the kids with their homework. Sometimes it's guided activities. But again, just thinking critically about what do the kids need? What do they need in that moment? What do they need in the long term? And our students are stepping up to fill the need that's been identified. Sometimes our students are engaging with the community through their coursework. And so we call that here community-based learning, and sometimes it's research. And so working to apply the core concepts that they're learning in their courses and engaging with the community around those issues. So for example, there are several first-year seminars that have community-based learning built into their class activities. So for example, a very popular and long-standing one is Trying to Find a Way Back Home, the literature of homelessness in America, which engages you with local agencies, and then during non-pandemic times, traveling to Washington, D.C. over the fall reading days to learn about homelessness in our nation's capital, and looking at everything from local community action to national policy responses. So those are that's an example. One example of research is a public health stats class in our health sciences department, where our students worked alongside agencies in learning about local data. So data was presented from across kind of like sectors of community action work, and they participated in bi-weekly workshops with community agencies. And then at the end of that experience, our students produced public kind of like social media and brochures and those kinds of things to help agencies communicate some of the messages that were important in those presentations, particularly in this case around mental health is where a lot of the focus was given. So those are some examples of how students are involved like in an ongoing way, right? And thinking we don't do a lot of just one-day things. There are some one-day opportunities, but really we want students to focus on building the relationship to gain that deep understanding, to start working toward long-term change in solidarity with people. But that also means that we need to look at different contexts, right? We can kind of get a myopic view by looking just at Adams County. And so we have partnerships all over the country and the world, and you can travel there with us through immersion projects. So looking at what community change looks like in different contexts with different approaches. One example of a long-standing one is to León, Nicaragua, where we have a sister city partnership that's about 35 years old, and looking at what sustainable development looks like in a developing economy. And that gives us a lot of power because we look at neighborhood basics, we look at rural contexts and urban contexts, and understanding also how US foreign policy has impacted the everyday person living in León, Nicaragua. So just one example of an immersion project. Those do have a cost associated with them, but we have generous donors, alumni, friends, parents of the college who have helped us create endowments so you can apply for scholarships to participate in those immersion projects. The other important aspects of our work is that our work is centered around students. So yes, we have a professional staff, but we also have a core of 25 student leaders who work in our office, who facilitate those partnerships, who facilitate your work in the community. And so they're your peer leaders, but they're also getting a deep kind of dive into the work of community organizing. And so that's an opportunity that you can pursue during your time at Gettysburg College. And what we're particularly excited about too is that alumni and friends of the college have also funded summer fellowships and grants, so that during the summer, maybe when you have a little more breathing room, you can apply to work here in Adams County and be paid, right, to think about what immigration and food policy look like here in Adams County, and also put that in a national and global context. Or you can apply for an international fellowship and looking at, for example, arts and community change in Kathmandu, Nepal, in youth development in Omaruru, Namibia, or also at kind of sustainable development and community change, again, in León, Nicaragua. So 8 to 9 week fellowships in these different communities. So those are just some examples. Again, I just want to emphasize that this really is student-led, student-centered with a strong grounding in community partnership. Again, looking at how you can use your power as an individual to create change in groups of people. So again, welcome to Gettysburg, not only the college, but here to Adams County. Andy?
Thanks so much, Gretchen, and I echo your comments about welcome. It's a pleasure to be on this call with you all tonight, and yeah, excited to share with you about some additional learning opportunities at Gettysburg College that we have offered through the Garthwait Leadership Center. And my guess is that you've been accepted to Gettysburg because you have been actively involved in the work of leadership, whether that is a formal leadership role or maybe the practice of it, even if you maybe don't admit that you are a leader. And what my guess is some of the other institutions that you've applied for or been accepted to may also value the work of leadership, but there's few colleges, actually less than 6% of all colleges and universities have a sustained ongoing leadership development program. Now I say development because what we focus on at the GLC is actually the cultivation of key leadership skills. And what we call that the how. And both Rob and Gretchen have talked about doing some intentional work, whether that is in our community or in the world or with public policy. And what we've realized is students need guidance on how to actually implement and work with a group to achieve a common goal. And that is the way that we look at leadership. We believe leadership, which is ethical, inclusive, and collaborative, should be directed towards effecting change for the greater world and the greater good. And that takes some intentional self-development. And so we have designed a series of programs, services, and offerings that no matter what you choose to study, or how you spend your time outside the classroom, you in your 4 years will have access to an opportunity to develop these skills and leave Gettysburg being able to not only to be, have exposure to a strong academic experience, but also the practical tools of leadership. And we have an endowed program here. So the Garthwait Leadership Center is named after our benefactor, Bob Garthwait Jr., who was member of the class of 1982 and also a former trustee. And we saw the opportunity to provide these free of charge experiences for students to take a deep dive into self-awareness, understand who you are as an aspiring leader and how you might develop these skills to be able to apply them in whatever leadership pursuits you choose to do that. And much like Gretchen and Rob mentioned, we are also a student-focused institution. So what we mean by that is we actually pay student leaders to not only get a higher degree of learning, but also to be peer educators. And so we work with two different groups of student leaders, the leadership mentors and our outdoor facilitators, who work directly with students to teach particular skills. And through those peer educators, we're able to serve over 1,500 students every year. So that's over half of the population at Gettysburg currently. And really that can be, you can engage with these programs even before orientation. For example, we have a 5-day pre-orientation experience called Ascent. And that is where you are connected to a small group of about 10 to 12 incoming first years. And the moment you arrive to campus, we start packing your bag to go on a 5-day experience in the backcountry. So whether that's kayaking, rock climbing, or even backpacking. And through that small group experience, you can get connected to a group and generate some friendships even before orientation begins, but also reflect on some key questions of leadership and self-awareness, which is, who do you want to be at Gettysburg? Perhaps you are a very active and engaged leader in high school. How might you continue that at a place like Gettysburg College? So that's one experience that you can do even before your classes begin. Also, something that's available in your first year, but also in your second year as well, is a co-curricular leadership certificate. So this is not for credit, but we have about 100 of our what I would consider emerging leaders each year decide to work towards the certificate. And this is a one-year program that starts in the fall. And again, you get connected to a small group that is facilitated by a student leader. And in those small groups, which you meet with monthly throughout the year, you focus on foundational leadership skills, such as ethical decision-making. So identifying your values. What are the values that guide how you make decisions? Collaboration skills. So what is it that makes effective teams work together well? And how can you practice shared leadership as both a leader and a follower to do that? Even communication skills. So recognizing that everyone has our own unique style, how can we lean into our strengths and practice communication in a way that can achieve shared understanding between you and your audience? Also in that certificate, you can get connected to a trained leadership coach. And both Rob and Gretchen have served in that role. It's a faculty member or a staff member who is trained to work with you one-on-one to help set leadership development goals. So recognizing where you are now and where you want to be, that coach will help empower you to get there. So that's another experience that, again, is available to you when you so choose. Some other things we do, we have a 24,000 square foot challenge course on campus. So if ever you've participated in a ropes course, you might be familiar with both low ropes and high ropes. These are what I consider a leadership learning laboratory, where you can take the day or an afternoon, even with an intact group or something you could do individually. And there we put you through simulations and experiential learning exercises that test out what does it feel like to engage in conflict? How do you make a group decision? And the challenge course is a phenomenal place to really work through those issues where the risk is low, but the learning and the impact is high. A new program that we've started just this year that we hope to offer in the future as well is a partnership with some facilitators from Google who designed a program particularly to teach emotional intelligence and mindfulness. And if you're anything like me, mindfulness is something you can always work towards, especially being more sort of regulating and managing of your emotions in these stressful times. And so this is a 6-week course that you can take. It's not for credit, but certainly has its benefits, where you engage with facilitators in a group of about 30 other students, and you practice mindfulness techniques that help you identify a little bit more about who you are, but also how to engage with someone empathetically and compassionately, and do that in a way that is productive. And then finally, one thing I'd like to say is a program we offer even after you graduate. So I know that probably seems like a long way away, but it's reassuring to know that once you graduate from a place like Gettysburg, you can get connected with an alumni coach. And so this is someone who has been trained in coaching and leadership development. And let's say you're applying for your first management position, but don't really know how or where to go. You can call Gettysburg College, we'll match you with an alumni coach, and they'll be able to work with you for about a 3-month program, a 3-month period to help develop that skill. And even that is free of charge even after you graduate from Gettysburg. So those are a few examples of some of the programs that we offer. It is very hard to come to Gettysburg and not develop your leadership skills, but it is comforting to know we have a leadership center that is designed and intended to ensure that when you graduate here, you're prepared to use the tools of leadership. So thanks very much. And I will now turn it over to Gail for our moderator.
Thank you, Rob and Gretchen and Andy, for talking with such great enthusiasm about your programs. Now this is a time for all of you to get your questions answered about these 3 distinctive programs. And like, you can use the Q&A for that, that function. And now is a good time to type in your questions. While people are thinking about the questions that they have, Rob, can you talk a little bit more about this connection the Eisenhower Institute has with Washington, D.C., which is really so very close to Gettysburg?
Sure. We have as I mentioned, we have an office that's in Washington, D.C., about a block and a half from the White House. That's where Susan Eisenhower and one of our program managers work out of that office. So we're just outside of Lafayette Square Park. We use that under normal times. We use that. We have a conference room down there. So a lot of times the programs that I mentioned before, we'll use the conference room to go down there to meet people. It's a great place because instead of having to go across DC 3 or 4 different times, we can have people come to us in that office. So we've had people, whether it's people from the Capitol Hill, people from an NGO, people from a think tank, come over to that office and talk to our students down there. And so we use that as kind of our base of operations. So we have some offices down there that folks work out of, but we also have room down there to actually have speakers come in. It can hold about 40 people in that room. So it's a great meeting space, convening space for people to come in and talk to students down there. Oh, you're on mute, Gail.
Sorry about that. Thank you, Rob. Here's a great question. Are these programs things that students participate in on top of 4 to 5 class schedule, or do any of the programs take the place of a class?
I can start with that if you'd like, Gail. Many of these things are co-curricular, so students do these on top of a class here. However, there are so many ways that our students integrate their co-curricular experiences into their class experience. So for example, I don't want to speak on your behalf, Rob, but for the Eisenhower Institute, with some of the programs, the semester-long programs, those sometimes lead to then research projects that are integrated into, say, like a capstone class or something like that. Like I mentioned, there are usually around 45 community-based learning and research classes per year. So like Spanish 200 classes, for example, those classes incorporate working with the community. So those are all ways that our students integrate. The other way that we see that is especially with our seniors who can reflect back on their 4 years and say, this is how I put together my co-curricular experiences with the Garthwait Leadership Center, with the Center for Public Service, with the Eisenhower Institute, with my major, no matter what that major is, and how that creates my holistic Gettysburg College experience. And sometimes that's like for most of their 4 years, sometimes that's an intensive semester for them. But there are many ways that our students put those together in a way that makes sense for them.
Thank you, Gretchen. Here's a question for Andy. How can I participate in the GLC? Do I need to apply to the program in order to start in the fall semester? If so, is it open for first-year students?
Yeah, thank you for that question. If you choose to participate in your first year as a student, yes, you would need to apply in the fall semester. But the word apply, I want to put a caveat there because one of our core values is access. So if you, let's say for the leadership certificate, that's something you're interested in doing, which is that year-long program. It's a registration process. So if you indicate that you have interest in the program and are willing to make the commitment, we believe everyone has that potential to lead. So we want to make sure you have the opportunity. So yes, that would be an example of applying in the fall. However, if you want to focus on your academics in your first year and perhaps want to get your feet firmly on the ground in the first year, then it's available for you to do in the following year. And we send out a number of communications to students and also host open houses and virtual sessions to make sure you don't miss those deadlines. If you wanted to do something later on in that semester or in the spring, yes, there's opportunities there as well that you can engage with at any point in your Gettysburg career.
Thank you, Andy. And Rob, here is a question for you. Is it possible to do a summer internship at the DC office of the Eisenhower Institute?
So the college itself does not have, at this point, we don't host internships there, but we're very well connected in Washington, DC. So we have a lot of our students who've gone through programs who end up interning in Washington, DC. Not necessarily at the Eisenhower Institute. We've had them do it for members of Congress and certain think tanks and groups like that. And we are happy to use our connections and Rolodex to try to help find a student who's interested in that, to try to connect them with someone who does offer summer internships.
Thank you. Gretchen, can you talk a little bit about how many Gettysburg students are involved with the Center for Public Service?
Yeah, happy to do that. What I find exciting is that every year over half of our student body is participating in the Center for Public Service by offering more than 10 hours or more of work with the community. So that comes out to be about 1,500 students per year that are working on programs through our office. However, that's not the only way that our Gettysburg College students are engaged with the local community. And so like on our senior exit surveys, as many as 80 to 82% of our students say that they've been engaged in some kind of community service during their 4 years here at Gettysburg College. And so that's exciting to me because it's an actively engaged community with the community. And it's something that people share in common. It's something that they can talk about and kind of draw on a shared experience.
Thank you. Are there additional questions that all of you have? Rod, do you want to talk a little bit about the Eisenhower Fellows and their project work for this year?
Which one?
Yeah, right. You can talk about actually both fellows programs.
So well, and I'll just talk about it more generally because they've done some really amazing things. So the Fielding Fellows program has, for the last several years, worked with a State Department grant where they will research a question. A few years ago, they did this interesting thing on what to do with bases in the Azores, right? How to repurpose those. And the great thing about that is they've done this every year for at least, I think it's been 4 years now that they've been doing these. But they do research on that. And this is in addition to whatever other things that they're doing. But they do research on that, and then they get a chance to present it to a board at the State Department. So if it's the Azores or whatever it is, they're able to do that. For the undergraduate fellows, they have worked on, they usually pick a topic that they develop, and they present to, so the Eisenhower, it gets a little confusing with all the Eisenhower. There's an Eisenhower Fellows program that's separate from the college. And those are people internationally who are selected for this program for doing really amazing things. And so we partner with them sometimes, and the undergraduate fellows have partnered with them to talk about things like the future of NATO, which is one that they did a couple of years ago. They've looked at issues about, this year they're looking at US involvement during the Eisenhower administration, but also continuing there of kind of covert operations, foreign policy issues that are related to that. So they have a wide group of people that they can tap into for that. Typically, they will travel the two places. So a couple of years ago, they went to visit NATO headquarters in Brussels. But this year with COVID, we're not able to travel, but they've still been able to bring in people and tap in people through Zoom to connect with people who are in a wide variety of areas like that. So there are a lot of opportunities to do that as a senior. I will tell you one thing of those programs that all except for those senior fellows, as a first year student, usually it's the second or third week of the semester. So we try to time it so that first year students can be involved in those programs, and we intentionally don't eliminate anyone based on their year. So this year we have quite a few first year students going through those. So there are opportunities really throughout your time here to take part in those.
Mm-hmm. Thank you, Rob. Are there any additional questions for our panelists? Thank you so very much for joining us this evening, and thank you to the panelists for sharing your enthusiasm for Gettysburg College and your working with students. Accepted students, you should know this is a place that is actively engaged. Students are involved both in their classroom and outside of the classroom, and these three distinctive programs play a huge role in students' life when they're here. If you have additional questions at all about Gettysburg College, please reach out to me directly, and I'll be glad to help you make the kinds of connections that you need with members of our community. So thank you very, very much, and enjoy the rest of your evening.